All right. Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, ruled by Venus, as we can see over there, and the 28th. So it's about 9:59. So I am officially on time today. Wasn't able to do a video yesterday. I had some technical issues with my PC being exactly where it needed to be in time to do it, and I never did get around to it. So I'm super sorry. Again, I'm in the middle of a move, but that's okay. We're just gonna keep on doing this right along through it as best as I can. And I actually have decided too that if there are days that I cannot get my computer up and running and accessible to do the stream like this, that I'm still going to do a mini episode by recording on my phone. So I have the capability to do that now, and I know how I would do it. So there may be some instances, particularly next week, where I still do an episode, but it is done from my phone. So the videos may be a little bit shorter or less quality, less pretty than these ones, but at least the information will be there, and it lets my audience and myself know how dedicated I am to this, no matter what, now that I've got it figured out. So let's get into the astrology, guys. Today is, again, the 28th. It's ruled classically by Venus. Fridays are always ruled by Venus, the planet of love and heart, and beauty. So none of the spheres other than the moon has changed signs. And as far as the moon phase goes, we have so we're definitely through assessing. Where we're at right now is kind of in between the phase of discernment and fear. So we're more so in this way of things, and this just speaks to the anxiety of doing new things, the anxiety of things being fully illuminated. Sometimes there's skeletons in the closet that we've forgotten about that at some point will need to be cleared out. Sometimes there really is, things to be feared in life, but this card is typically pulling out what needs to be dealt with. So that's what this phase is really about, typically, as the moon phase goes along. And today the moon is in Sagittarius. So the energy of the moon being in Sagittarius, the adventurer, the journeyman, the hero that goes the distance and saves the princess by going through the mountains and doing all the stuff that he had to do to like save the day, save the princess, and go on the hero's journey. Sagittarius is that epitome of that hero. And so the moon passing through this energy can bring things forward very directly. So where you might have a conversation with your roommate very indirectly about how you wish that they could just do things just slightly differently. It would really help you if they just did this one thing, if they just shut the door that's at this particular time, or to keep the toilet bowl lid flushed or whatever. And a lot of times we have very passive ways to gently remind people in our vicinity what our needs are, and remind them of how you help them with their needs, so that there's a give and a take. Sagittarius energy is just going to be that roommate that walks right up to you and be like, why do you do this? It bothers me that you do this, but I really logically don't understand why you do this. Can you please explain it to me? There's a difference between, hey, can you please do this for me? And there's a difference between, hey, why do you do that? I wouldn't do that. I just want to know how and why you do it. So it's not even an ask of like, hey, can you do this differently? They're not even asking for anything. They're just asking for your logic of why. That's a very Sagittarius thing to do. So as the moon comes through this, and this is the phase that we're in, we might be emotionally dealing with some things that are very straightforward, very blunt. And for some of us, we're just not like that. I'm very like that. I'm a born Capricorn with a lot of Sagittarius and Aquarius energy around me, and I have a lot of planets in those. So that direct energy, I would probably be that person. That's like, I don't care you do it this way, but like, I'm very curious as to why you even do it in the first place. So all the other planets and spheres are in the same energies as they have been, several of which are in their home sign. Sun is at home in Leo, Mars is at home in Aries, and Jupiter is at home in Sagittarius. Saturn is at home in Capricorn. So if you look down below the date, you'll see that there are 3 different black planets, and those are the planetary rulers. So they have stayed the same through the course of all this, and that's Primarily why is that they're in good position, they're in home, and throughout the week they've been making really, really good aspects to other things that give them even more power energy. As I look at this, all I see is a lot of trine energy. These blue connections are trines, and so these can be friendly. These energy lines can freely pass back and forth to each other without any worry. Whereas the squares or oppositions, see, this is a good example of a square between well, this is Mars square Jupiter right here. So this is a good example of that. This is a 90-degree angle, and they're really missing each other, and can't very easily communicate. Not super friendly. Squares can bring a lot of challenge. Trines can bring a lot of helpful energy. So we have a lot of trine energy happening today with Mercury trining over to, we can see this, Jupiter, and also Neptune. No, Uranus, sorry. Where is that at? Let's see. Oh, right here. This dotted line means it's not perfect. So Mercury is trining both of those areas. Now, if we were to, I'm going to go back over to my my screen so I can see it here. We've got planets lined up on either side of my screen. Now, my kind of mini rant or lesson for the day is going to be that each of the planets have like this higher octave to them. And we're not necessarily looking at beneficial or malefic in this way at all. We're just looking at kind of the higher octaves. Mercury's kind of higher octave planet is Uranus. And if you start thinking about the mythology and you start thinking about the meanings behind them, that might start to make a little bit of sense. Mercury is of mind, is the messenger of the gods. And he's also a lot of the time depicted as Hermes. And Hermes can be seen with the flying, you know, any D&D players in the area? Yes? Okay. Because I totally see Hermes like with the little boots and the little wings. It's actually like a D&D item that you can get in a lot of a lot of campaigns. And so, you know, I always think of Hermes, the messenger, when I think of that, and it's totally epitome of Mercury and the kind of reputation he has. Uranus, on the other hand, is a bit of newer to us, although it's a far away planet. Typically in astrology, it carries the reputation of Zeus up in the sky. Lightning bolt and thunder much. And so, sorry, that, it's not Zeus, is it? Now I'm just getting myself confused. Yes, Uranus was a primal Greek god personifying the sky and one of the Greek primordial deities. Uranus is associated with the Roman god. I always read the names, and I'm not very good at pronouncing them out loud. Roman god Caelus, Caelus. In ancient literature, Uranus, or the father sky, was the son and husband of Gaia and the primordial mother Earth. So there's a little bit of a background. So he's up there with the pantheon of Zeus and things like that. So and Uranus typically give you some keywords. If Mercury's keyword is mind, Uranus's would probably be intelligence. That's kind of cool to think about. Moving on, what else we've got? Venus, the high note of Venus, or the higher octave of Venus, would be Neptune. So Venus is typically, you know, that of the heart, rule of the heart, and the aspect of love and beauty. And Neptune is again a far out planet. But let's look at its mythology for a moment. All right, so I'm going to put my full capture display on so that we can see. Neptune is the god of fresh water and sea in Roman religion. He is the counterpart of the Greek god Poseidon. Neptune is the brother of Jupiter and Pluto. The brothers preside over the realm of heaven and the earthly world and the underworld. So where I find this octave very interesting between Venus and Neptune is the mystery of the heart and passion and love in general. But also the mystical aspect of Neptune really has to do a lot with the underworld, the subconscious, the illusions, the mystery, and a lot of that is wrapped up in why people do the things that they do for love. And so that aspect, that tie together, is really interesting if you start to think about how subconscious love is at times. Love at first sight, meeting someone that you just met that you feel like you've known forever. That there's a mystical Neptunian quality to those encounters, and as you progress through those relationships, there's a heartfelt soul love that can occur. And those type of people, that doesn't happen all the time, right? That person may end up being the person that you marry, or it may just end up being one of your very best friends. A lot of those times, those type of people are either your students or your teachers. So please be aware of that. A lot of times we end up falling in love with our teacher, or we end up falling in love with someone that we are meant to help throughout life. So you can easily kind of tell these kinds of relationships there's usually something about it that doesn't work in the relationship, whether that be a bigger age gap, a spiritual block, a racial block, something that just, it wouldn't make sense for those two people to be together, even though there's this heartfelt thing. And so those type of relationships are very Neptunian in nature. But Neptune is definitely, I would say, one of the good guys. It's one of the planets that it definitely has an influence on things, but it's very, very far away. So its influence is over the long term, whereas Venus's term is very quick. You know, there's lots of love to go around. You can love just a complete stranger sitting next to you, if there's something to tie you together, even just for a split moment. I mean, you can literally, love is free. You can love anything that you want and give it away as much as you possibly can. But Neptune is there to remind us that real relationships and real soul love takes longer than a lifetime. And so just like we hear about, you know, our birthdays are an Earth return. It's a whole year of us going all the way around the sun. That's how long it takes us to go all the way around and come back to our birthday. That's why we have birthdays. And we can say, you know, we have all these different birthdays with all these different planets. And then we have Saturn return that happens that just happened to me a couple years ago. Gosh, it was crazy. But we have that in between years 28 and 29. So the next return then would be Saturn-Uranus. So how long is Uranus's orbit? When would we have a Uranus birthday? 84 years. Are you going to make it past 84? I don't know. Dad, I'll have to call you back. But what about Neptune? 165. So it's definitely less than 1% of the population has a Neptune return. And so that's how long term some of these planets are and some of their influences are. So if we say, we'll just pretend that we're going to use an equal house system and say 165 divided by 12, 13. So it's going to spend about 12 to 14 years in one sign alone. So something to think about. Neptune's only going to transit so many different places in your chart. A little bit sure. So interesting enough, Mars, so Saturn and Jupiter are kind of brothers. They kind of like complement each other, and so they kind of take away any opportunity for people to really have a higher or lower octave of those two, because they kind of go together. And so I can't really use a higher octave for Jupiter or Saturn. That leaves Mars. Mars being assigned to Pluto actually starts to make a lot of sense if you think about it, as the higher octave. Mars is the warrior. He's fiery. He's yang. He rules signs like Aries, and he's known for being the warrior, the doer, the laborer, the action of any circumstance. And Pluto, although super, super, super slow, Pluto is always the one making these crazy, crazy connections to the planets that end up feeling like huge differences and impacts, particularly in the outer world when it comes to government and control and things like that. Ridiculous. So to wrap up, Pluto would be personal power, or just power in general. So if Mars is action and Pluto is power, then we can see the relation between them as a lower and higher octave. The action has enough built up energy to it. It becomes powerful. You know, this is the difference between, like, we'll use D&D as a reference again. So if we have like you know, Mercury and Uranus characters, if you were to build them up as D&D characters, would totally be based on intelligence. Totally, 100%. So any of the characters that you could build based around intelligence would be prime for this. Magician, or so wizard, you know, any of those. And then if you were to assign or build a Uranus or Pluto character, you would be building a probably strength-based barbarian or fighter, or if you were playing for Pluto, you would probably be more like a paladin, or a ranger, or a probably not a ranger, but anyways, like you'd be like more of like a paladin than anything else. And then for Neptune and Venus, you'd probably, Venus, druid comes to mind like immediately. But for Neptune, I think more of like a wild sorceress, a wild sorcerer, or a cleric, or yeah. So just to give you some kind of idea for the nerds out there and stuff of like the personality and the persona, and also the power and the skills that each of the planets kind of carry with them, and some kind of reference that at least some of us might be able to pick up on. And you can imagine that as each of those different types of characters playing through a campaign, the Zodiac then becomes the terrain in which that player progresses through. And so each of the Zodiac brings something to the players, and the players bring something to the Zodiac when they are there, and when they're going through that area, whether it be a town or just a place that they have to visit, or an actual like different type of terrain, things like that. So that's kind of the difference. Whereas, you know, the Zodiac isn't really going to change. Like, the Zodiac is the Zodiac. You've got these different areas of space that we travel through as the characters of the story, or as in this case, we're talking about the planets through the solar system. So that's my like little mini like rampage lesson for the day, as I kind of slowly teach you guys a little bit about astrology as I, you know, show you the daily charts. So the one other thing that I wanted to look at in this video real quick is, of course, the helio. So in Helios, this is the sun-centered chart, and we will look at it in 3D here in a moment. All I'm seeing, so I'm going to ignore this because this is a... Oh, no, I'm not. No, I'm not going to ignore that. Not technical. This is a really close conjunction. So Earth and Mercury in the sun view is practically conjunct in Virgo. So got this stuff going on, which is bringing a square that is also happening in Helio. Saturn? No. Is it Jupiter? Is it Pluto? What is this? Venus, a square, Jupiter and Saturn. Okay, so Venus in Helio, so Sun Saturn, is squaring both Jupiter and Saturn over here. So these are challenges. Perceiving this from a sun-centered, we're thinking more big terms, more soul-oriented to this to ourselves. Just like we have this outer personality, the person that we present to the world, that we live in, with all the other people that are doing the same freaking thing. And then we have the inner person, the person that doesn't really change, that doesn't age, that doesn't look in the mirror, that doesn't, change. Maybe even doesn't even change throughout lifetimes and just takes on different personas and different personalities, different skill sets, different bodies to try and do different things, but really the ultimate goal and the person inside is still the same. So that's more the person that I'm talking to when we're looking at Helio. And so, inside the sun, there's something about Venus really struggling with what's being presented by the powerful and the large aspects of life. And so large being represented by Jupiter and Pluto representing the power or maybe the government. A lot of us are really still inner struggling with what's coming, what's happening, what the choices are. And even if we're not doing much to express that out into the world or share that with other people, we all have, if we live in the US, like, we all should vote. And that's a hard thing, and you may even have a household who's voting different directions. It's pretty common for families to have different opinions about things, and that's really hard. Some families talk very openly about this, and others don't. They never grew up talking about politics, so it just stays this kind of like taboo topic, but that each individual family member does actually go and vote, right? So there's this inner turmoil going on with what we're seeing out in the world and the big picture, the large scope, and the government, and how it affects us in here. And what we see and what we know inside is different than what we see and we know on the outside. And that's what makes the mind go so crazy sometimes, is you feel one thing and you see another and they don't match up. And your mind your conscious mind anyway starts going in circles. And it's not until Neptune gets involved to remind the subconscious and to drop you little filters of like, hey, you were right or you were wrong. And that's okay. So we're definitely having some Venus square these larger issues, and that to me doesn't surprise me at all. And Venus being in the energy of Aries and the Helio, kind of interesting too, because out of all the areas of space, there's so much less stuff in local space astrology in the Aries category. Aries is a very small sign, but that's the direction in which there is nothing else. Whereas the direction of Sagittarius is the direction of the galactic center, like the center of our galaxy. So there, there's a whole bunch more in that area of the sky, of the space. There's more stars, there's more gas, there's more clouds, there's more amazing radiation, there's just more gamma, there's more everything. The only reason we can't see the galactic center, because it's so bright in the center of our galaxy, is because there's big huge clouds and dust and particles literally in the way that's blocking it out, so we can't see it. But we know now, very recent, that it's in the direction of Sagittarius. And even better is how perfectly the hunter of Sagittarius, so the lens, the character that is Sagittarius that we think of, the hunter, is pointing his bow exactly center of the galactic center. It's like his bow is shooting the galactic center. So that's a really interesting thing to know for any astrologers, and to consider, is because just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, and it especially doesn't mean that it's not powerful. Again, I'm going on a D&D half rampage here, but these are very legitimate tips. So, I'll show you. Sagittarius is right here. Trying to find good presentation that kind of shows the actual constellation lines with the picture itself. I know I've seen it before, but it's kind of a hard one to visualize. Okay, this is a pretty good one. So if we go back and forth, this is the standing figure of the hunter, and he's holding his bow. This is kind of what people see when they look at Sagittarius. And typically, again, Sagittarius is looked at as a centaur, not human. Can go either way. I've seen there's lots of ones where he's not a centaur, but technically in the mythology, the centaur. So we have this bigger body, and he's turning around to shoot his bow. And when we look at, figure this out here. Here we go. So we've got the hunter, the body, and the bow. So here he is shooting his bow. So I know as an astrologer that this area contains the Galactic Center. What's the Galactic Center? For anyone who doesn't know, what I'm referring to is the actual center of our galaxy. This guy, this galactic sun, or GC, Galactic Center. Okay, and this is always, doesn't matter, because it's so far away, it's so distant, that it's always in Sagittarius. It's always in being shot by the Sagittarius figure. And here is where we are located within the galaxy. Now this isn't a real picture of a galaxy. It's a picture of a galaxy that we think is very, very, very similar to our own, of a picture that we actually do have. So we just use that picture, and we've actually been able to discern where different things are located within our galaxy and outside of our galaxy as well. Whole other big blobs like this that contain entire, systems. Okay, we're just one system, and within this system, a lot of systems have other systems. There is one thing that I wanted to actually, just as a side note, because I was wrong in my last video, which is actually technically a video on Wednesday. I was trying to look for Saturn's moon that went the opposite direction, and I was wrong. It wasn't Saturn. So we were looking at this, and I was like, oh yeah, Saturn has one of the moves that goes the opposite way. No, it's not Saturn, actually. This is pretty accurate for Saturn's system. It has some different varying moons that are missing here that go way out and actually have a lot to do with how it makes its rings. But what we want to actually go see is Uranus is the one that's tipped totally vertical. Oh my gosh. Wacky here. Neptune. Guys, it's Neptune who has the moons that go to different directions. So check this out. So one of them is following its spin. The other one is at a little bit of a different incline going around. But what the heck? They're totally going opposite direction. So this is Neptune, that mysterious, subconscious, mystical, no, we didn't know this until just a couple of years ago. Like, how would we know? Until we started to, look at actually having satellites that were out there looking and spending time out there. But now we have Cassini actually just hanging out around Saturn. So we know a lot more about Saturn and all these different places than we did a couple years ago. There's so much information coming out, it's hard to keep up. But when you can see it put into these programs and stuff, it makes it a really cool addition to the learning process and the scope of astrology and astronomy. So, pretty cool stuff. So just to pick up on set and say, hey, I figured it out. So can we stop? Let's stop. Pause. Okay. So that's a little bit about the astrology and a little bit just about the planets, kind of as typically a little bit of an educational episode, and I'm kind of trying to make up for it a little bit since I didn't do an episode yesterday. I feel kind of bad. So some may be short, some may be long. This is going to be a longer one, about 30 minutes. So I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your subs. And I hope to see much more of you guys in the future. All right. Have a good one. Peace.